Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome back to the live studios here at Govardhana Hill. We thank you for tuning in. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Is there an echo?
I hope not.
Okay. We're reading, in case you're joining us for the first time, in case you were on Parikram and you wandered in here, I don't know what's going on, please stay. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 9, Brahma's Prayers for Creative Energy, and we're already up to text number 10. We'll be reading straight through the third canto over the next several days, like 2 weeks. Text 10. First, we take permission from His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Prabhupada, and following his instruction to read his books. Om Tat Sat. Such non-devotees engage their senses in very troublesome and extensive work, and they suffer insomnia at night because their intelligence constantly breaks their sleep with various mental speculations. Sounds like being a temple president. They are frustrated on all their various plans by supernatural power. Even great sages, if they are against your transcendental topics, must rotate in this material world. Purport. As described in the previous verse, people who have no taste for the devotional service of the Lord are occupied in material engagements. Most of them engage during the daytime in hard physical labor. Their senses are engaged very extensively in troublesome duties in the gigantic plants of heavy industrial enterprise. The owners of such factories are engaged in finding a market for their industrial products, and the laborers are engaged in extensive production involving huge mechanical arrangements. Factory is another name for hell. At night, hellishly engaged persons take advantage of wine and women to satisfy their tired senses, but they are not even able to have sound sleep because their various mental speculative plans constantly interrupt their sleep. Because they suffer from insomnia, sometimes they feel sleepy in the morning for lack of sufficient rest. By the arrangement of supernatural power, even the great scientists and thinkers of the world suffer frustration of their various plans and thus rot in the material world birth after birth. A great scientist may make discoveries in atomic energy for the quick destruction of the world and may be awarded the best prize in recognition of their service, in parentheses, or disservice. But he also has to undergo the reactions of his work by rotating in the cycle of repeated births and deaths under the superhuman law of material nature. All these people who are against the principle of devotional service are destined to rotate in this material world without fail. This verse particularly mentions that even sages who are averse to the principles of devotional service to the Lord are also condemned to undergo the terms of material existence. Not only in this age, but formerly also, there were many sages who tried to invent their own systems of religion without reference to devotional service to the Supreme Lord. But there cannot be any religious principle without devotional service to the Lord. The Supreme Lord is the leader of the entire range of living entities, and no one can be equal to or greater than him. Even the Lord's impersonal feature and all-pervading localized feature cannot be on an equal level with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, there cannot be any religion or system of genuine philosophy for the advancement of the living entities without the principle of devotional service. The impersonalists who take much trouble in penance and austerity for self-liberation may approach the impersonal Brahmajyoti, But ultimately, because of not being situated in devotional service, they glide down again to the material world to undergo another term of material existence. This is confirmed as follows. Yene ravindakshava-muktamaninas tvayastabhavadavashudha buddhaya aruhya krishnena parampadam tata patantyato nadrita yushmadangraya. Persons who are falsely under the impression of being liberated without devotional service to the Lord may reach the goal of the Brahmajyoti. But because of their impure consciousness and for want of shelter in the Vaikuntha Lokas, such so-called liberated persons again fall down into material existence. Therefore, no one can manufacture any system of religion without the principle of devotional service to the Lord. As we find in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the initiator of religious principles is the Lord himself. In Bhagavad-gītā also, we find that the Lord condemns all forms of religion other than that which entails the process of surrendering unto the Supreme. Any system which leads one to the devotional service of the Lord and nothing else is actual religion or philosophy. In the 6th canto we find the following statements of Yamaraj, the controller of all unfaithful living entities. Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam navai vidurishayana pideva nasidhamukya asura manusha kuto nuvidyadara charanaya swayambhur narada shambhu kumara kapilo mano pralado janako bhishmo palirvaya sakirvayam dvadashaite vijanimo dharmam bhagavatam bhata guyam vishudham durbodhyam yam gyatvam ashnute. The principles of religion are initiated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and no one else, including the sages and demigods, can manufacture any such principles. Since even great sages and demigods are unauthorized to inaugurate such principles of religion, what to speak of others, the so-called mystics, demons, human beings, vidyadharas, and charanas living in the lower planets. 12 personalities, Brahmā, Narada, Lord Shiva, Kumara, Kapila, Manu, Prahlad Maharaj, Janak Maharaj, Bhishma, Bali, Shukadeva Goswami, and Yamaraj are agents of the Lord authorized to speak and propagate the principles of religion. Bhagavatam 6.3, 19 through 21. The principles of religion are not open to any ordinary living entity. They are just to bring the human being onto the platform of morality, nonviolence, etc. Okay. They are just to bring the human being onto the platform of morality. Nonviolence, etc. Nonviolence, etc. are necessary for misguided persons, because unless one is moral and nonviolent, one cannot understand the principles of religion. To understand what is actually religion is very difficult, even if one is situated in the principles of morality and nonviolence. It is very confidential because as soon as one is conversant with the real principles of religion, he is at once liberated to the eternal life of bliss and knowledge. Therefore, one who is not situated in the principles of devotional service to the Lord should not pose himself as a religious leader of the innocent public. The Ishopanishad emphatically forbids this nonsense in the following mantra. Antam tama pravishanti ye sambhutim upasate tato bhuya ivate tamo ya usam bhutyam rataha. Ishopanishad 12. A person in ignorance of the principles of religion who therefore does nothing in the matter of religion is far better than a person who misguides others in the name of religion without reference to the factual religious principles of devotional service. Such so-called leaders of religion are sure to be condemned by Brahmā and other great authorities. Text number 11. O my Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears by the process of bona fide hearing, and thus their hearts become cleansed. And you take your seat there. You are so merciful that your devotees, that you manifest yourself in the particular eternal form of transcendence in which they always think of you. The statement here that the Lord manifests himself before the devotee in the form in which the devotee likes to worship him indicates that the Lord becomes subordinate to the desire of the devotee, so much so that he manifests his particular form as the devotee demands. This demand of the devotee is satisfied by the Lord because he is pliable in terms of the transcendental loving service of the devotee. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad-gītā 4:11. Yathā mam prapadyante tāṁs tathaiva bhajāmy aham. We should note, however, that the Lord is never the order supplier of the devotee. Here in this verse, it is particularly mentioned, tvaṁ bhakti-yoga-paribhāvita. This indicates the efficiency achieved through execution of matured devotional service, or prema, love of Godhead. This state of prema is achieved by the gradual process of development from faith to love. On faith, one associates with bona fide devotees, and by such association one can become engaged in bona fide devotional service, which includes proper initiation and the execution of the primary devotional duties prescribed in the revealed scriptures. This is clearly indicated herein by the word śrutekṣita, free from mundane sentiment. By this bona fide hearing process, the neophyte devotee becomes cleansed of all material rubbish, and thus he becomes attached to one of the many transcendental forms of the Lord as described in the Vedas. This attachment of the devotee to a particular form of the Lord is due to natural inclination. Each and every living entity is originally attached to a particular type of transcendental service because he is eternally the servitor of the Lord. Lord Chaitanya says that the living entity is eternally a servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Therefore, every living entity has a particular type of service relationship with the Lord eternally. This particular attachment is invoked by practice of regulative devotional service to the Lord, and thus the devotee becomes attached to the eternal form of the Lord exactly like one who is already eternally attached. Duly noted. This attachment for a particular form of the Lord is called swarup siddhi. The Lord sits on the lotus heart of the devotee in the eternal form the pure devotee desires, and thus the Lord does not part from the devotee, as confirmed in the previous verse. The Lord, however, does not disclose himself to a casual or inauthentic worshipper to be exploited. This is confirmed in Bhagavad-gītā 7:25. Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavrita. Rather, by yogamaya, the Lord remains concealed to the non-devotees or casual devotees who are serving their sense gratification. The Lord is never visible to the pseudo-devotees who worship the demigods in charge of universal affairs. The conclusion is that the Lord cannot become the order supplier of a pseudo-devotee, but he is always prepared to respond to the desires of a pure, unconditional devotee who is free from all tinges of material infection. Text 12. My Lord, you are not very much satisfied by the worship of the demigods, who arrange for your worship very pompously with various paraphernalia, but who are full of material hankerings. You are situated in everyone's heart as a super soul just to show your causeless mercy, and you are the eternal well-wisher, but you are unavailable for the non-devotee. The demigods in the celestial heavenly planets, who are appointed administrators of the material affairs, are also devotees of the Lord, but at the same time they have desires for material opulence and sense gratification. The Lord is so kind that he awards them all sorts of material happiness, more than they can desire, but he is not satisfied with them because they are not pure devotees. The Lord does not want any one of his innumerable sons, the living entities, to remain in the material world of threefold miseries, to perpetually suffer the material pangs of birth, death, old age, and disease. The demigods in the heavenly planets and many devotees on this planet also want to remain in the material world as devotees of the Lord and take advantage of material happiness. They do so at a risk of falling down to the lower status of existence, and this makes the Lord dissatisfied with them. Pure devotees are not desirous of any material enjoyment, nor are they averse to it. They completely dovetail their desires with the desires of the Lord and perform nothing on their personal account. Arjuna is a good example. On his own sentiment, due to family affection, Arjuna did not want to fight. But finally, after hearing Srimad Bhagavad-gītā, he agreed to fight in the interests of the Lord. Therefore, the Lord is very much satisfied with pure devotees because they do not act for sense gratification, but only in terms of the Lord's desire. As Paramatma, or super soul, he is situated in everyone's heart, always giving everyone the chance of good counsel. Thus, everyone should take the opportunity and render transcendental loving service to him wholly and solely. The non-devotees, however, are neither like the demigods nor like the pure devotees, but are averse to the transcendental relationship with the Lord. They have revolted against the Lord and must perpetually undergo the reactions of their own activities. Bhagavad-gītā 4:11 states, Ye yathā mām prapadyante, tāṁs tathaiva bhajāmy aham. Although the Lord is equally kind to every living being, the living beings, for their own part, are able to please the Lord to either a greater or lesser extent. The demigods are called sakama devotees, or devotees with material desires in mind, while the pure devotees are called nishkama devotees because they have no desires for their personal interests. The sakama devotees are self-interested because they do not think of others, and therefore they are not able to satisfy the Lord perfectly, whereas the pure devotees take the missionary responsibility of turning non-devotees into devotees, and they are therefore able to satisfy the Lord more than the demigods. The Lord is unmindful of the non-devotees, although he is sitting within everyone's heart as well-wisher and supersoul. However, he also gives them the chance to receive his mercy through his pure devotees, who are engaged in missionary activities. Sometimes the Lord himself descends for missionary activities, as he did in the form of Lord Chaitanya, but mostly he sends his bona fide representatives, and thus he shows his causeless mercy towards the non-devotees. The Lord is so satisfied with his pure devotees that he wants to give them the credit for missionary success, although he could do the work personally. This is the sign of his satisfaction with the pure nishkama devotees, compared to the sakama devotees. By such transcendental activities, the Lord simultaneously becomes free from the charge of partiality and exhibits his pleasure with the devotees. Now a question arises: if the Lord is sitting in the hearts of non-devotees, why are they not moved to become devotees? It may be answered that the stubborn non-devotees are like It may be answered that the stubborn non-devotees are like the barren land or alkaline field where no agricultural activities can be successful. As part and parcel of the Lord, every individual living entity has a minute quantity of independence. And by misuse of this minute independence, the non-devotees commit offense after offense to both the Lord and his pure devotees engaged in missionary work. As a result of such acts, they become as barren as an alkaline field where there is no strength to produce. Text 13. But the pious activities of the people, such as performance of Vedic rituals, charity, austere penances, and transcendental service performed with a view to worship you and satisfy you by offering you the fruit of results, are also beneficial. Such acts of religion never go in vain. Absolute devotional service conducted in 9 different spiritual activities, hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping, praying, etc., does not always appeal to people with a pompous nature. They are more attracted by the Vedic superficial rituals and other costly performances of social religious shows. But the process according to the Vedic injunctions is that the fruits of all pious activities should be offered to the Supreme Lord. In Bhagavad-gītā 9:27, the Lord demands that whatever one may do in one's daily activities, such as worship, sacrifice, and offering of charity, all the results should be offered to him only. This offering of the results of pious acts unto the Supreme Lord is a sign of devotional service to the Lord and is of permanent value. Whereas enjoying the same results for oneself is only temporary. Anything done on account of the Lord is a permanent asset and accumulates in the form of unseen piety for gradual promotion to the unalloyed devotional service of the Lord. Those undetected pious activities will one day result in full-fledged devotional service by the grace of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, any pious act done on account of the Supreme Lord is also recommended here for those who are not pure devotees. Let me offer my obeisances unto the Supreme Transcendence, who is eternally distinguished by his internal potency. His indistinguishable impersonal feature is realized by intelligence for self-realization. I offer my obeisances unto him who by his pastimes enjoys the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. Purport: the Supreme Lord is eternally distinguished from the living entities by his internal potency, although he is also understood in his impersonal feature by self-realized intelligence. Although he is also understood in his impersonal feature by self-realized intelligence. Devotees of the Lord, therefore, offer all respectful obeisances unto the impersonal feature of the Lord. The word rasa is significant herein. The rasa dance is performed by Lord Krishna in the company of the cowherd damsels at Vrindavan, and the personality of Godhead, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, is also engaged in rasa enjoyment with his external potency by which he creates, maintains, and dissolves the entire material manifestation. Indirectly, Lord Brahmā offers his respectful obeisances unto Lord Sri Krishna, who is factually never engaged in rasa enjoyment with the Indirectly, Lord Brahma offers his respectful obeisances unto Lord Sri Krishna, who is factually ever engaged in rasa enjoyment with the gopis, as confirmed in the Gopal Tapani Upanishad in the following words. Prarardhante so putyata gopavesho me purusha rastad avir vabhuva. The distinction between the Lord and the living entity is definitely experienced when there is sufficient intelligence to understand his internal potency, as distinguished from the external potency by which he makes possible the material manifestation. 15. Let me take shelter of the lotus feet of him whose incarnations, qualities, and activities are mysterious imitations of worldly affairs. One who invokes his transcendental names even unconsciously at the time he quits this life is certainly washed immediately of the sins of many, many births and attains him without fail. Purport. The activities of the incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are a kind of imitation of the activities going on in the material world. He is just like an actor on a stage. An actor imitates the activities of a king on stage, although actually he is not the king. Similarly, when the Lord incarnates, he imitates parts with which he has nothing to do. In Bhagavad-gītā 4:14, it is said that the Lord has nothing to do with the activities in which he is supposedly engaged. Namam karmani limpanti name karma palespriha. The Lord is omnipotent. Simply by his will he can perform anything and everything. When the Lord appeared as Lord Krishna, he played the part of the son of Yashoda and Nanda, and he lifted the Govardhana hill, although lifting a hill is not his concern. He can lift millions of Govardhana hills by his simple desire. He does not need to lift it with his hand. But he imitates the ordinary living entity by this lifting, and at the same time he exhibits his supernatural power. Thus his name is chanted as the lifter of Govardhana hill, or Sri Govardhanadhari. Therefore his acts in his incarnations and his partiality to the devotees are all imitations only, just like the stage makeup of an expert dramatical player. His acts in that capacity, however, are all omnipotent, and the remembrance of such activities of the incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is as powerful as the Lord himself. Ajamil remembered the holy name of the Lord, Narayan, by merely calling the name of his son Narayan, and that gave him a complete opportunity to achieve the highest perfection of life. 16. Your Lordship is the prime root of the tree of the planetary systems. This tree has grown by first penetrating the material nature in three trunks, as me, Shiva, and you, the Almighty, for creation, maintenance, and dissolution. And we three have grown with many branches. Therefore I offer my obeisances unto you, the tree of the cosmic manifestation. Purport. The cosmic manifestation is grossly divided into three worlds, the upper, lower, and middle planetary systems, and when it broadens into the and then it broadens into the cosmos of 14 planetary systems. With the manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the supreme root. Material nature, which appears to be the cause of the cosmic manifestation, is only the agency or energy of the Lord. This is confirmed in Bhagavad-gītā 9:10. Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. Only under the superintendence of the Supreme Lord does material nature appear to be the cause of all creation, maintenance, and dissolution. The Lord expands himself into three, Vishnu, Brahmā, and Shiva, for maintenance, creation, and destruction respectively. Of the three principal agents controlling the three modes of material nature, Vishnu is the Almighty, even though he is within material nature for the purpose of maintenance. He is not controlled by the laws of material nature. The other two, Brahma and Shiva, although almost as greatly powerful as Vishnu, are within the control of the material energy of the Supreme Lord. The conception of many gods controlling the many departments of material nature is ill-conceived of by the foolish pantheists. God is one without a second, and he is the primal cause of all causes. As there are many departmental heads of governmental affairs, so there are many heads of management of the universal affairs. Due to a poor fund of knowledge, the impersonalist does not believe in the personal management of things as they are. But in this verse, it is clearly explained that everything is personal and nothing is impersonal. We have already discussed this point in the introduction, and it is confirmed here in this verse. The tree of the material manifestation is described in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad-gītā as an ashvata tree whose root is upward. We have actual experience of such a tree when we see the shadow of a tree on the bank of a reservoir of water. The reflection of the tree on the water appears to hang down from its upward roots. The tree of creation described here is only a shadow of the reality which is Parabrahman, Vishnu. In the internal potential manifestation of the Vaikuntha Lokas, the actual tree exists, and the tree reflected in the material nature is only the shadow of this actual tree. The impersonalist theory that Brahman is void of all variegatedness is false because the shadow tree described in Bhagavad-gītā cannot exist without being the reflection of a real tree. The real tree is situated in the eternal existence of spiritual nature, full of transcendental varieties, and Lord Vishnu is the root of that tree also. The root is the same, the Lord, for both the real tree and the false. But the false tree is only the perverted reflection of the real tree. The Lord, being the real tree, is here offered obeisances by Brahmā on his own behalf and also on behalf of Lord Shiva. And now we'll take a few reflections or questions. Yes, Mahendra Prabhu.
2 questions. One is, what is a casual devotee? And the other is about Lord Shiva mentioned that he is also covered by the modes, but we know that he is the best of Vaishnavas and they are not usually covered by under the influence. Also the modes are controlled by his wife, who is obviously under his control. How do you explain that?
Can I do one question at a time?
Okay.
Casual devotee means somebody who doesn't finish his or her rounds and makes an excuse why that's okay, or doesn't follow regulator principles and makes an excuse why it's okay. And as far as Brahma goes, Prabhupada describes many different kinds of Brahmas because it's a post. Our Brahma met Krishna directly. We know that. Krishna gave him empowerment, in fact. And what else can I say? What's wrong with it?
No, it's about Lord Shiva.
Oh, it's about Lord Shiva. What about Lord Shiva?
That he's also under the modes, which was the question that he's the topmost Vaishnava, and Vaishnavas are not covered by the modes.
Well, how'd you like a service like that? You have to take care of the mode of ignorance. He's doing the heavy lifting. Plus he's a missionary. He has a whole planet full of misfits that he takes care of. He's into Western preaching. And he goes on Harinam. That's in the Bhagavad-gītā. He takes his Harinam party out throughout the Brahma Jyoti even. Vaishnavanam yatā Shambhu. I think there's different descriptions. Prabhupada says sometimes like a light covered by carbon. Shiram yatahadad vikara vishesha yoga. Just a slight difference. And the great controllers aren't held responsible for their apparent indiscretions. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta quoted that regarding Lord Brahma.
I was a little surprised by what Prabhupada wrote in the purport to text 15, because I thought that the activities of the incarnations of the Lord are all the Lord's eternal pastimes, and that Krishna's partiality towards his devotees is a real thing. But Prabhupada says that those things are all imitation only, like an actor on a stage.
Well, that's a conundrum. It's called vidambanam. That's what all devotees, great acharyas, say to Krishna. It appears that you're attached, but you're not attached. So how are you doing that? So it's okay to be a little bit bewildered by that, because everybody else is too. And I think it's in the Gopal Tapani where, what's his name? The big sage who eats everybody's out of house and home. Huh? No, the sage who eats everybody out of house and home, Durvasa. He goes, the gopis go to see him to get some benediction. He said, what are the two things you told him? Krishna's a brahmachari. And there was one other thing, I forget. But that's a jumping off place for this vidambanam. He is, but he isn't, because he's not at any time attached to anything, but at the same time, he's controlled by his devotees' love. Yes?
Be accurate to say that Krishna is unattached in tattva and he's attached in rasa?
That always helps.
That's kind of like, would that be the right way of looking at it, or a way?
It's a very helpful way of doing that, yeah, I think. Yes, Prabhu.
In the first text we read, I thought Prabhupada was making a very interesting point. He writes that the principles of religion are not open to any ordinary living entity. And I was thinking that when we go on book distribution or Sankirtan, we're actually giving the most confidential knowledge to anyone and everyone. And Prabhupada is explaining that it's actually very, very rare. I thought it was a very interesting point.
Yeah, he also said oftentimes people have a better advantage if they haven't been indoctrinated yet. And he quoted that verse from Ishopanishad. How does that start? Andam tama pravishanti ye sambhutim upasate tatabuye vite tamo ya usambhutyam rataha. Yeah, it's like Bhagavad-gītā's class today. Something extraordinary. It's worth taking a look at it again. Let's take a little closer look here. See what's really going on. Do you know who your children are? Yes, McCarvin.
That the tvaṁ bhakti-yoga-paribhāvita hit saroja, that purport was like really amazing, the whole purport. And one of the section where Prabhupada describe how one become attached, and he says that it's a process. It's not like samsahajya, like that you follow particular, you follow the Vedic bhakti, and then by that devotee become attached to the eternal form of the Lord, exactly like one is already eternally attached, and that is Swarup Siddhi. So he gives.
I love that.
Yeah.
Become attached like one who's already eternally attached.
So that is amazing. Prabhupada has very
amazing.
Very clarify on that. And then one of the next purport, Prabhupada tells about difference between Sakam devotee and Niskam devotee. And he was telling...
I just want to point out that it's a point of clarity in one's practice that we were discussing over the last couple of days in relationship to how did I get into the position I'm in now. And Prabhupada says it's not knowable from our perspective now, but when one comes to this position of seeing one's eternality and feeling one's eternal relationship with the Lord, it becomes clarified. at that point. That's what Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, from the point of clarity of one's spiritual position. He calls it chit samadhi. Then one becomes clear about, or he has no misgivings about the idea of his involvement in the material world. Not in the sense of, oh, it's no big deal. Partly that's the case, because one sees, oh, I never had anything to do with it. I was never fully invested in it because it's always superfluous. But there's a clarity that I'm eternal, the Lord's eternal, my relationship's eternal. And that fear of the material existence and the psychological condition of feeling a victim becomes immediately eradicated from that position of seeing one's relationship with Krishna. Go ahead, Prabhu, next one you were going to say. And then Sudhir Madhava Prabhu has his hand up.
Yeah, and then...
Javi Prabhu, are you out there? Can you hear me? Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. He told me to speak up. I'm sorry.
The second point in the next purport, Prabhupada was saying that difference between Sakam devotee and Niskam devotee, and Sakam devotee are self-interested because they do not think of others, and therefore they are not able to satisfy the Lord perfectly, whereas the pure devotees take the missionary responsibility of turning non-devotees into devotees, and they are therefore able to satisfy the Lord more than the demigods. So the Lord is, so that differentiation, I like how Prabhupada is saying difference between both of them, and which follows the Bhagavad-gītā's conclusion, that in which 18th chapter Krishna says that those who share this knowledge is the most dear to me.
Nice points, Mukarvan. Sudhira, and then back to His Grace Mahendra Prabhu.
The second point in that story that you were mentioning, crossing the river, one was that you mentioned Sri Krishna being a Naishtika Brahmachari, and second one is that Durvasa Muni is an eternal Upavasi, one who fasts, and just after he had a huge feast.
Does it say more about the implicit meaning in that?
Yes, I'll let Mahendra Prabhu speak.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I just wanted to continue on that purport, that it was, I was struck by how Prabhupada it make the distinction and added not just that pure devotees are not interested in anything for themselves and don't have material desires, but they actually engage in helping others. That makes them very dear. It's not their complete aloofness.
And there can be a way in which, when devotees are trained to do good for others, they get a higher taste, so that they're able to not be selfish. It's also that when devotees are trained about how to go out and give Krishna consciousness to others, it's kind of a sadhana, as Prabhupada mentions in several of his purports. And by doing that, there's a way that the devotees rise to that position of not being selfish by doing the activity itself.
And further, it's an interesting way, Prabhupada, if you can elaborate in that same purport, that devotees are never, or the Lord is never order supplier of the devotee. Here it is mentioned tvaṁ bhakti-yoga-paribhāvita. This indicates the efficiency achieved through execution of mature devotional service or prema. Just the word efficiency, this is achieved through efficiency.
Well, one thing comes to mind. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just repeat it. Indicates the efficiency achieved through prema.
Just in the story, as one example, there are more. A Gopinath Patanyayaka. He was, I think we were here discussing the Changa, or was that in the other Sangha? And he was being punished by the prince because of not paying a debt. More than that, he had insulted the prince, and so the prince put him on the changa, which is a high platform with swords underneath, where you'd push the captive off, and then they would be impaled by the swords and executed. So he was threatening him by leaving him on the changa, and devotees went to Lord Chaitanya to intervene, and he was so disturbed by that request that he threatened to leave and go to Olalanath. And as the story unfolds, just coming to the end minus all the details, it's mentioned by Kaviraj Goswami that his Gopinath Bhattanayaka's income was doubled. He was given a silken wrapper for his head, which was a sign of distinction, even though he was stealing from the government. And of course Mahaprabhu said don't do it again, but Kaviraj Goswami says just see, Mahaprabhu's mercy is automatic. Even without asking, Mahaprabhu's mercy comes to his devotees. So that's pretty efficient.
Yes. About the story.
Yeah. Yes.
The story of Durvasa.
Yeah.
They ask him how you're upavasi. You just ate this big feast, and how Krishna is brahmachari. We were last night with him, and then he explained it's not for you. I eat for my pleasure, or Krishna does it for his pleasure. It's to take your service. That's why.
That's what Durvasa says.
Yes.
That
yes.
both of them, Krishna is taking service from the gopis.
Yeah. That's why he is engaged with their loving relationship. And Durvasa took the feast to please them, because to accept their service. And he is not interested in his pleasure, therefore he is upavasi.
Fascinating. 1, 2. Go ahead. Namsuli.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
About Krishna's detachment or attachment, it reminded me of two things. One is that in Bhagavad-gītā, samoham sarvabhuteshu namedveshyosti na priya. He's neither attached nor detached, but when someone really fully depends on Krishna, and he says, Krishna, I know that devotee knows nothing but Krishna, and Krishna knows no one but devotees, then he gives up all the idea of being detached or being far, and then he becomes involved with the devotee's life, and he starts taking charge of the devotee.
It's an excellent citation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Krishna Saka, did you have a point? We'll go back to Sudhir Madhava. Anybody from outside right after Sudhir Madhava?
Well, as per a quick research in a few articles, it looks to expand on what Mahendra Prabhu also said. The reason behind Krishna being a Nitya Brahmachari and Durvasa Muni also being a Nitya Upasak is that Krishna is explaining that if one identifies or sees only the external as the body, then that is where the illusion comes into picture. But he's saying really from an Atma's perspective, I'm a Brahmachari and he's not honoring, it's just a body. So that's the essence that you were asking, the lesson mentioned so far.
Okay. Is that from the Gopal Tapani or from somebody's commentary on it?
I'll look up, Guru Maharaj.
Huh?
I'll look it up.
Okay. Outside?
Hare Krishna. There was mention of casual devotees in the purport, and sometimes I've met or had to try and encourage casual devotees. What's the best remedy?
For casual devotees? What's the best remedy? I don't know. I'm a casual devotee, so the best remedy for myself is to find a level of sadhana that I can accommodate and then try to improve on it. And as far as encouraging other people in devotional service, having readings of Prabhupada's books in public, where you just sit for a few hours a day, something you can try, and just hear. I find that much of the casualness comes from forgetting how important it is. Or hear one of Bhanabbata Prabhu's classes. That ought to knock some sense into you. I mean, everybody needs encouragement. There's a way that we get attacked by our senses, our mind, by onslaught of information from the world. So easy to become distracted or dissuaded about the strict process of devotional service. And the answer is always the same thing. You come back to association with more advanced devotees and hear Krishna Katha. And in that assembly of devotees where the devotees are just interested in hearing Krishna Katha and discussing together, Prabhupada mentions as one of his last purports, he said, if you do this, then everything becomes clear. You can overcome conflicts and have a clear idea about what to do, what to speak of, developing a kind of determination that you didn't have before. In fact, I remember one year, maybe it was 7 years ago, we read the whole fourth canto. I know we read it last year too, but we read the full fourth canto, and there was a brahmachari here. He was listening. If you remember the fourth canto, it's very intense about the implications of getting attracted to the opposite sex. And I just remember after one of those long medicinal sessions, I was walking past and that brahmachari was talking to somebody and he was saying, "What was I thinking?" As if the clouds had just parted. And it was from hearing Bhagavatam, sitting in a room in the middle of Govardhana. But you can do it anywhere. And I find that whole assemblies of devotees, if you hold open class and people can come and just discuss and hear from Prabhupada's books, and of course chanting, and there's 5 main activities that Lord Chaitanya said are so powerful that even if somebody doesn't have faith in them, and they only contact them slightly, he said they'll be effective in transforming the person. So I always know in myself when I notice a casual mentality, if I get in the association of devotees and I'm able to hear and chant, then I feel rectified. And I say to myself, what was I thinking? Hopefully I'll say that several times a day. Like, what were you thinking, Vaisesika Dasa? And then recommit. Yes, Pana Prabhu?
It reminds me how this process of being in the material world and being an eternally conditioned soul, like Prabhupada said, our nature is forgetfulness in the world. And I'm always reminded of this verse from Bhagavatam 2nd chapter where it says, Dharma sunusita pumsa vishwakshina kadasya no pradiyadita yadiratim shrama evi kevalam. And Prabhupada says the occupational activities a man performs, and we're all performing some kind of occupational service, he says according to his own position, are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of God. It doesn't say that they're like, it's not that bad, but it's not like really good. It says it's useless labor. And I'm thinking how easy it is to forget about it. Like I notice it all the time. Like when I have problems in my devotional service, which I have all the time, and which I'm, trying to intuit what's the reason for my dissatisfaction. And it's so simple and it's so easy. And we read it in that verse, Bhagavatam verse this morning, also just by Krishna Katha, just by hearing and chanting, everything else is destroyed. But if we're not applying ourselves to that process, then it's just so, because it's like the name, form, quality, pastimes of the Lord are inconceivable. And only when we're actually engaged in that process, can we actually remember that? You know what I'm saying? That's why we need constant association of devotees who have that desire and, can help us if we're falling off track. Say, hey, let's get together, let's, read some Bhagavatam.
There's an old saying, it's amazing how little I get done when I'm not actually doing the thing I'm supposed to be doing. Okay, last one, and then we'll have a Gauranga stand-up break and keep going.
Just on this point, it reminded me of one verse, I can't remember where it is, but it's something like talking about how the worst calamity that can befall a human being is to think that there's something else more important than self-realization. So I think that's what leads to becoming a casual devotee, is we start prioritizing wrongly, thinking that, this is more important, this is more pressing, this is more urgent, and I can chat my rounds later, or, I'll read later and procrastinate, and then it just doesn't happen, and then becomes a pattern.
There's a way in which, when we were having programs based on meetup.com, lots of people were coming who were very casual about Krishna consciousness. And we conceived of a way of defining the difference between those who were not casual and those who were casual. And that is, the casuals thought Krishna is a thing. And the devotees say that Krishna is the thing. And that's sort of a point. And I really like your point too. And there's a way that, unless we're vigilant, there are different levels of being casual that one can descend to. Same time, there's a balance, because the opposite of being casual doesn't mean to be fanatical either, and become condescending and a nuisance.
It's sort of like a perspective shift, so that the casual devotee sees their spiritual life as supporting the material life, right? Like, I do my japa because it makes me peaceful, so that when I go to work I can do better. Whereas the serious devotee sees their job and whatever else as supporting their spiritual life, and it doesn't, then get rid of it.
Right.
Like that.
Exactly. It's a good point. Okay, finish. You have the points, and then we're closed.
You're right. As always, this is from Gopal Tapani Upanishad. Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati comments on it. And there are many lessons from the story, but one main aspect is that Krishna is explaining the importance of an Atmaram, a spiritually satisfied soul. So from that perspective, those two statements can be looked. And also connecting from your class in Vrindavan, it's a leela, it's pastime. So it's not fully logical.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just one quick stand up. What happened? Oh. People in general all engage in foolish acts, not in the really beneficial activities enunciated directly by you for their guidance. As long as their tendency for foolish work remains powerful, all their plans in the struggle for existence will be cut to pieces. I therefore offer my obeisances unto him who acts as eternal time. Did you like the last verse? Too much. People in general are all engaged in senseless work. They are systematically unmindful of the real beneficial work, which is the devotional service of the Lord, technically called the Archana regulations. The Archana regulations are directly instructed by the Lord in the Narda Pancharatra and are strictly followed by the intelligent men, who know well that the highest perfectional goal of life is to reach Lord Vishnu, who is the root of the tree called the cosmic manifestation. Also in the Bhagavatam and in the Bhagavad-gītā, such regulative activities are clearly mentioned. Foolish people do not know that their self-interest is in realization of Vishnu. The Bhagavatam 7.5.30 through 32 says, Matirna Krishne Bharataksvatova Mito Pipadyeta Grahavratanam Adanta Gobir Vishatam Tamisram Punak Punascharvita Charvananam Natevadu Swartagatim Hi Vishnu Durashaya Ye Bahir Artamanina Andaya Chander Upaniyamanas Tepi Shatantram Urudam Nibada Naisham Batista Vadarukramangrim Sprishatyanartha Pagamo Yarartaha Mahiya Sampara Rajobhishekam Iskinchananam Navranita Yavat. Persons who are determined to totally rot in false material happiness cannot become Krishna-minded, either by instructions from teachers, by self-realization, or by parliamentary discussions. They are dragged by the unbridled senses into the darkest region of ignorance, and thus they madly engage in what is called chewing the chewed. Because of their foolish activities, they are unaware that the ultimate goal of human life is to achieve Vishnu, the Lord of the cosmic manifestation, and so their struggle for existence is in the wrong direction of material civilization, which is under the external energy. They are led by similar foolish persons, just as one blind man is led by another blind man, and both fall in the ditch. Such foolish men cannot be attracted towards the activities of the Supreme Powerful, who is actually the neutralizing measure for their foolish activities, unless and until they have the good sense to be guided by the great souls who are completely freed from material attachment. In Bhagavad-gītā, the Lord asks everyone to give up all other occupational duties and absolutely engage in archana activities, or in pleasing the Lord. But almost no one is attracted to such archana activity. Everyone is more or less attracted by activities which are conditions of rebellion against the Supreme Lord. The systems of jnana and yoga are also indirectly rebellious acts against the Lord. There is no auspicious activity except archana of the Lord. Jnana and yoga are sometimes accepted within the purview of archana, when the ultimate aim is Vishnu and not otherwise. The conclusion is that only the devotees of the Lord are bona fide human beings eligible for salvation. Others are vainly struggling for existence without any actual benefit. Your Lordship, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you who are in indefatigable time and the enjoyer of all sacrifices. Although I am situated in an abode which will continue to exist for a time duration of 2 praratas, although I am the leader of all other planets in the universe, and although I have undergone many, many years of penance for self-realization, still I offer my respects unto you. Purport. Brahmā is the greatest personality in the universe because he has the longest duration of life. He is the most respectable personality because of his penance, influence, prestige, etc. And still he has to offer his respectful obeisances unto the Lord. Therefore, it is incumbent upon all others who are far, far below the standard of Brahmā to do as he did and offer respects as their matter of duty. O my Lord, by your own will you appear in the various species of living entities, among animals lower than human beings, as well as among the demigods, to perform your transcendental pastimes. You are not affected by material contamination. You come just to fulfill the obligations of your own principles of religion, and therefore, O Supreme Personality, I offer my obeisances unto you for manifesting such different forms. Purport: the Lord's incarnations in different species of life are all transcendental. He appears as a human being in his incarnations of Krishna, Rama, etc. But he is not a human being. Anyone who mistakes him for an ordinary human being is certainly not very intelligent, as confirmed in Bhagavad-gītā 9:11. Avajananti mam udha manushim tanumashritam. The same principle is applicable when he appears as the hog or fish incarnations. They are transcendental forms of the Lord and are manifested under certain necessities of his own pleasure and pastimes. Such manifestations of the transcendental forms of the Lord are accepted by him mostly to enliven his devotees. All his incarnations are manifested whenever there is a need to deliver his devotees and maintain his own principles. 20. My Lord, you accept the pleasure of sleeping in the water of devastation where there are violent waves, and you enjoy pleasure on the bed of snakes, showing the happiness of your sleep to intelligent persons. At that time, all the universal planets are stationed within your abdomen. Purport: persons who cannot think of anything beyond the limit of their own power are like frogs in a well, who cannot imagine the length and breadth of the great Pacific Ocean. Such people take it as legendary when they hear that the Supreme Lord is lying on his bed within the great ocean of the universe. They are surprised that one can lie down within water and sleep very happily. But a little intelligence can mitigate this foolish astonishment. There are many living entities within the bed of the ocean who also enjoy the material bodily activities of eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. If such insignificant living entities can enjoy life within the water, why can't the Supreme Lord, who is all-powerful, sleep on the cool body of the serpent and enjoy in the turmoil of violent ocean waves? The distinction of the Lord is that his activities are all transcendental, and he is able to do anything and everything without being deterred by limitations of time and space. He can enjoy his transcendental happiness regardless of material considerations. 21. O object of my worship, I am born from the house of your lotus navel for the purpose of creating the universe by your mercy. All these planets of the universe were stationed within your transcendental abdomen while you were enjoying sleep. Now your sleep having ended, your eyes are open like blossoming lotuses in the morning. Purport: Brahmā is teaching us that the beginning of Archana regulations from morning 4 o'clock to night 10 o'clock. Early in the morning, the devotee has to rise from his bed and pray to the Lord. And there are other regulative principles for offering Mangalarti early in the morning. Foolish devotees, not understanding the importance of Archana, criticize the regulative principles, but they have no eyes to see that the Lord also sleeps by his own will. The impersonal conception of the Supreme is so detrimental to the path of devotional service that it is very difficult to associate with stubborn non-devotees who always think in terms of material conceptions. Impersonalists always think backwards. They think that because there is form in matter, spirit should be formless. Because in matter there is sleep, in spirit there cannot be sleep. And because the sleeping of the deity is accepted in Archana worship, the Archana is Maya. All these thoughts are basically material. To think either positively or negatively is still thinking materially. Knowledge accepted from the superior source of the Vedas is standard. Here in these verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find that the Archana is recommended. that Archana is recommended. Before Brahma took up the task of creation, he found the Lord sleeping on the serpent bed in the waves of the water of devastation. Therefore, sleeping exists in the internal potency of the Lord, and this is not denied by pure devotees of the Lord like Brahma and his disciplic succession. It is clearly said here that the Lord slept very happily within the violent waves of the water, manifesting thereby that he is able to do anything and everything by his transcendental will and not be hampered by any circumstances. The Mayavadi cannot think beyond this material experience, and thus he denies the Lord's ability to sleep within the water. His mistake is that he compares the Lord to himself, and that comparison is also a material thought. The whole philosophy of the Mayavad school, based on not this, not that, neti neti, is basically material. Such thought cannot give one the chance to know the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is. 22. Let the Supreme Lord be merciful towards me. He is the one friend and soul of all living entities in the world, and he maintains all for their ultimate happiness by his 6 transcendental opulences. May he be merciful toward me so that I, as before, may be empowered with the introspection to create, for I am also one of the surrendered souls who are dear to the Lord. The Supreme Lord Purushottam, or Sri Krishna, is the maintainer of all in both the transcendental and material worlds. He is the life and friend of all, because there is eternally natural affection of love between the living entities and the Lord. He is the one friend and well-wisher for all, and he is one without a second. The Lord maintains all the living entities everywhere by his 6 transcendental opulences, for which he is known as Bhagavan, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Brahma prayed for his mercy so that he might be able to create the universal affairs as he did before. Only by the Lord's causeless mercy could he create both material and spiritual personalities like Marichi and Narada respectively. Brahma prayed to the Lord because he is very much dear to the surrendered soul. The surrendered soul knows nothing but the Lord, and therefore the Lord is very affectionate towards him. 23. The Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead, is always the benefactor of the surrendered souls. His activities are always enacted through his internal potency, Brahmā, or the goddess of fortune. I pray only to engage in his service in the creation of the material world, and I pray that I not be materially affected by my works, for thus I may be able to give up the false prestige of being the creator. Purport: in the matter of material creation, maintenance and destruction, there are 3 incarnations of the material modes of nature: Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwar. But the Lord, give yourself 20 points if you said Maheshwar. But the Lord's incarnation as Vishnu, in his internal potency, is the supreme energy for the total activities. Brahma, who is only an assistant in the modes of creation, wanted to remain in his actual position as an instrument of the Lord instead of becoming puffed up by the false prestige of thinking himself the creator. That is the way of becoming dear to the Supreme Lord and receiving his benediction. Foolish men want to take credit for all creations made by them, but intelligent persons know very well that not a blade of grass can move without the will of the Lord. Thus all the credit for wonderful creations must go to him. By spiritual consciousness only can one be free from the contamination of material affection and receive the benedictions offered by the Lord. 24. The Lord's potencies are innumerable. As he lies down in the water of devastation, I am born as a total universal energy from the navel lake in which the lotus sprouts. I am now engaged in manifesting his diverse energies in the form of the cosmic manifestation. I therefore pray that in the course of my material activities, I may not be deviated from the vibration of the Vedic hymns. Every person engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord in this material world is prone to so many material activities, and if one is not strong enough to protect himself against the onslaught of material affection, he may be diverted from the spiritual energy. In the material creation, Brahmā has to create all kinds of living entities with bodies suitable to their natural conditions. Brahmā wants to be protected by the Lord because he has to contact many, many vicious living entities. An ordinary Brahmana may fall from the Brahma Tejas, or the power of Brahminical excellence, due to his association with many fallen conditioned souls. Brahmā, as the supermost Brahmana, is afraid of such a fall down, and therefore he prays to the Lord for protection. This is a warning for one and all in the spiritual advancement of life. Unless one is sufficiently protected by the Lord, he may fall down from his spiritual position. Therefore, one has to pray constantly to the Lord for protection and the blessing to carry out one's duty. Lord Chaitanya also entrusted his missionary work to his devotees and assured them of his protection against the onslaught of material affection. The path of spiritual life is stated in the Vedas to be like the edge of a sharpened razor. A little inattentiveness may at once create havoc and bloodshed, but one who is completely surrendered soul, always seeking protection from the Lord in the discharge of his entrusted duties, has no fear of falling into material contamination. The Lord, who is supreme and is the oldest of all, is unlimitedly merciful. Sausabhadrakarano bhagavam vavridha prema smitena nayanam burham vrichinvan utaya vishva vijayaya chano vishadam madhyagiratmana yathā purusha purana. That's one of the prayers for waking up the Lord, given in the Archana Padati. The Lord, who is supreme and is the oldest of all, is unlimitedly merciful. I wish that he may smilingly bestow his benediction upon me by opening his lotus eyes. He can uplift the entire cosmic creation and remove our dejection by kindly speaking his directions. Purport. The Lord is ever increasingly merciful upon the fallen souls of this material world. Ever increasingly merciful. The whole cosmic manifestation is a chance for all to improve themselves in devotional service to the Lord, and everyone is meant for that purpose. The Lord expands himself into many personalities who are either self-expansions or separated expansions. The personalities of the individual souls are his separated expansions, whereas the self-expansions are the Lord himself. The self-expansions are predominators, and the separated expansions are predominated for reciprocation of transcendental bliss with the supreme form of bliss and knowledge. The liberated souls can join in this blissful reciprocation of predominator and predominated without materially concocted ideas. The typical example of such a transcendental exchange between the predominator and the predominated is the Lord's Rasa Lila with the gopis. The gopis are predominated expansions of the internal potency, and therefore the Lord's participation in the rasa dance is never to be considered like the mundane relationship of man and woman. It is rather the highest perfectional stage of the exchange of feelings between the Lord and the living entities. The Lord gives the fallen souls the chance for this highest perfection of life. Lord Brahma is entrusted with the management of the complete cosmic show, and therefore he prays that the Lord bestow his blessings upon him so that he may execute its purpose. Maitreya, the sage, said, O Vidura, after observing the source of his appearance, namely the personality of Godhead, Brahmā prayed for his mercy as far as his mind and words would permit him. Thus, having prayed, he became silent, as if tired from his activities of penance, knowledge, and mental concentration. Brahma's enlightenment in knowledge was due to the Lord sitting within his heart. After being created, Brahmā could not ascertain the source of his appearance. But after penance and mental concentration, he could see the source of his birth, and thus he became enlightened through his heart. The spiritual master outside and the spiritual master within are both representations of the Lord. Unless one has contact with such bona fide representations, one cannot claim to be a spiritual master. Unless one has contact with such bona fide representations, one cannot claim to be a spiritual master. Lord Brahmā had no opportunity to take the help of a spiritual master from outside, because at that time Brahmā himself was the only creature in the universe. Therefore, on becoming satisfied by the prayers of Brahmā, the Lord enlightened him about everything from within. The Lord saw that Brahmā was very anxious about the planning and construction of the different planetary systems, and was depressed upon seeing the devastating water. He could understand the intention of Brahmā, and thus he spoke in deep, thoughtful words, removing all the illusion that had arisen. The devastating water was so fearful that even Brahmā was perturbed at its appearance and became very anxious about how to situate the different planetary systems in outer space to accommodate the different kinds of living entities, such as the human beings, those lower than the human beings, and the superhuman beings. All the planets in the universe are situated according to the different grades of living entities under the influence of the modes of nature. There are 3 modes of material nature, and when they are mixed with one another, they become 9. When the 9 are mixed, they become 81, and the 81 also become mixed. And thus we ultimately do not know how the delusion increases and increases. Lord Brahmā had to accommodate different places and situations for the requisite bodies of the conditioned souls. The task was meant only for Brahmā, and no one in the universe can even understand how difficult it was. But by the grace of the Lord, Brahmā was able to execute the tremendous task so perfectly that everyone is amazed to see the workmanship of the vidhata, or the regulator. The Supreme Personality of Godhead then said, O Brahmā, depth of Vedic wisdom, be neither depressed nor anxious about the execution of creation. What you are begging from me has already been granted before. Any person authorized by either the Lord or his bona fide representative is already blessed, as is the work entrusted to him. Of course, the person entrusted with such a responsibility should always be aware of his incapability and must always look for the mercy of the Lord for the successful execution of his duty. One should not be puffed up because he is entrusted with certain executive work. Fortunate is he who is so entrusted, and if he is always fixed in the sense of being subordinate to the will of the Supreme, he is sure to come out successful in the discharge of his work. Arjuna was entrusted with the work of fighting on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and before he was so entrusted, the Lord had already arranged for his victory. But Arjuna was always conscious of his position as subordinate to the Lord, and thus he accepted him as the supreme guide in his responsibility. Anyone who takes pride in doing responsible work, but does not give credit to the Supreme Lord, is certainly falsely proud and cannot execute anything nicely. Brahmā and persons in the line of his disciplic succession who follow in his footsteps are always successful in the discharge of loving transcendental service to the Supreme Lord. O Brahmā, situate yourself in penance and meditation and follow the principles of knowledge to receive my favor. By these actions you will be able to understand everything from within your heart. The mercy the Lord bestows upon a particular person engaged in executing the responsible work entrusted unto him is beyond imagination. But his mercy is received due to our penance and perseverance in executing devotional service. Brahmā was entrusted with the work of creating the planetary systems. The Lord instructed him that when he mediated, he would very easily know where and how the planetary systems must be arranged. The directions were to come from within, and there was no necessity for anxiety in that task. Such instructions of buddhi yoga are directly imparted by the Lord from within, as confirmed in Bhagavad-gītā 10:10. O Brahmā, when you are absorbed in devotional service, in the course of your creative activities, you will see me in you and throughout the universe, and you will see that you, yourself, the universe, and the living entities are all in me. It is cited herein by the Lord that during his daytime, Brahmā would see him as Lord Sri Krishna. He would appreciate how the Lord expanded himself into all the calves during his childhood at Vrindavan. He would know how Yashoda Mayi saw the universes and planetary systems within the mouth of Krishna during his playful childhood pastimes, and he would also see that there are many millions of Brahmas during the appearance of Lord Krishna in Brahma's daytime. But all these manifestations of the Lord appearing everywhere in its eternal transcendental forms cannot be understood by anyone but the pure devotees who are always engaged in devotional service to the Lord and are fully absorbed in the Lord. The high qualifications of Brahmā are also indicated herein. And that brings us to a Gayatri break. So at this time, we'll take a 10-minute recess to meditate on the Gayatri mantra or on other transcendental mantras or subject matters. Om Tat Sat.